Hi, welcome to episode 6 of Save Our Stars. My name is Bryan Richards. I am your host. Today on episode 6, we're going to talk about life skills. I am solo today, so it'll just be a solo show, and I appreciate you tuning in. So, in order to get into life skills, I first wanted to give a little bit of a background, and I know that a lot of my listeners do know a little bit about me, but also I just wanted to dip in a little bit into my coaching history so that you can kind of understand where I'm coming from with some of this stuff. And I'm currently 37 years old, and I started coaching high school sports at the age of 22. So 15 years in. I went right from the dugout to as a player to being a coach. And my early years of coaching, I think I primarily focused on outcomes, and I primarily focused on the sport, and I primarily focused on player development. And that development was skill development, not the type of development that we'll talk about today in regards to life skills. So, as a results focused coach and a sports focused coach, I did have, fortunately, was able to have a lot of success early coaching sports and being a young head coach. And everything kind of changed for me a little bit when I was given this unique opportunity in 2013. I was hired as a head softball coach at a school that I was working at as a school counselor. And the reason that it was kind of a unique opportunity was because up to this point I had primarily coached young men. I had helped out and done a couple of girls camps and for basketball and things like that. But I was given this unique opportunity without knowing a lot of details about the position. I just was hired as a counselor, and they were looking for someone that was willing to coach. And, I was just used to coaching, and I was a young father at the time. Not really young in an age sense, but young in the sense of, being a new dad. So it was a good opportunity. And I was so glad that I took that opportunity because it taught me something about myself, and it also taught me a lot about how I was going to approach working with young adults moving forward. So this opportunity in 2013, I was a completely different coach at the time. I had gone in, I was running a very kind of up tempo and up pace tryout. I was an aggressive kind of go-getter type of coach, and intense and very different from the person that I am today. And I remember after the very first tryout, I felt like I was really hard on the girls, and I was just kind of trying to feel my way around and see if I was going to be able to pull this off, and how it was going to go working with young women, and see if they could relate to me and I could relate to them. And at the end of the practice, there was like 20 or 30 girls that had tried out. Every single one of them came up and thanked me. And that had never happened before. Like I said, I was, maybe 7 or 8 years into coaching. And at the end of the practice, I had never really been thanked. I had been approached by parents. I had been, talked to by, some of my players, but there was genuine thanks for, a great practice. Thanks for coaching us. Thanks for the opportunity. And that was something that repeated itself every day at practice. So in terms of life skills, I felt like this was a really unique bunch. And it wasn't just the thank you. It was the thank you that kind of got my brain thinking like, maybe these girls are far ahead of any of the boys that I had ever coached before. And also, one of the things that group of girls brought out in me was that they cared about me as a person and cared about my young family at the time. And it just kind of changed my approach of working with young people. And I started investing more into the type of person I was helping develop. Now, this was, I think beneficial for both sets, meaning the softball players brought something out of me and were interested in kind of my personal situation and my family. And it was easier for me to kind of relate to them and invest in their families because, on the flip side of being a hard-nosed kind of aggressive coach, I held this position in the district as a counselor, and my job was to listen and relate and be able to help students kind of open up or, share information and make some strides in growth and life skills and all sorts of things like that. So I started meshing the two jobs in a little bit that year in 2013, and I think it was for the better. Now, fast forward to 2020, I know that this group was unique in the sense that they had kind of figured some things out, and they were on a really good path to have success as, sophomores, juniors, and seniors in high school. And like I said, if you fast forward to 2020, we have in that group of 2013 players, we have public educators, we have really young educators that are working with really young kids, high school kids, middle school age kids. We have students that are players that are currently in the medical field. They're first responders. They're trying to be doctors. They're nurses. And then others that are excelling in the business field. So I think that, my experience of working with them and understanding that it wasn't always just results based, that it was okay to show my true colors and kind of be a human being and not be so results based, allowed me to kind of flip my switch as a coach. So after that great experience with them and understanding that it was okay, that we could still win games, that we could still practice really hard, but showing them that I cared about them and that they cared about me in return really changed the way that I've dealt with coaching every day since that season. So it was a unique opportunity that allowed me to learn a lot about myself as a coach, and then be able to translate that into working with young people moving forward, and also being a dad, and being a dad of 3 young kids. That experience, I always think back that, these kids were so genuine, and they were so, well respected amongst each other, and they were good teammates, and they cared about each other, and they cared about me. But it also made me think about being a parent, and that they had really good parents, and their parents must have taught them really well. And we had some really great families with that group. So I left that season thinking that, wow, these kids are going to be all right. Like, they've got it really figured out. It was the spring. A lot of them were seniors. They had great plans. They had great support networks. And my approach with them and their approach with me helped turn me into a better coach, and hopefully a better father. And I think one of the underlying things here as a parent is you just want to know that your kids are going to be all right. And when I left that season, I knew that those girls were going to have a lot of success, that they were going to surround themselves with good people, and that they were going to make good decisions. And part of that had to do with the fact that they were really a mature group of kids, but also that their families had focused on the important things, and they made being a good person and being a good friend and being genuine and being thankful and being respectful priorities. And that was such a special group of kids. I have a team picture in my office still, 7 years later, of that group, because it's a good reminder that my job as a coach is not only to develop the player, but to develop the person. And I think that that's kind of where life skills ties into this episode. So I thought I would just share that story, and, a quick shout out to all of those young women that were on the 2013 softball team. And I don't know if I'm their audience. I don't even know if a lot of them have watched an episode, but I do stay connected with those people still. So, and some of their families, even if it's just trading a Christmas card. And I know that a lot of good came out of that group for them, but also a lot of good came out of that group for me as a person. I think it changed, kind of the light bulb went off for me. And I wasn't as young as I'd like to think I was. I was maybe 28 or 29 years old. So I wasn't a young guy, but I was a young dad. And I certainly had been this intense coach working with young men for a number of years up to that point. And this kind of helped me maybe develop into the coach that I want to be, and certainly develop into the parent that I want to be. So I always go back to that group because they were so fantastic. And I think when I think of life skills and the end results of teaching your kids and teaching your players life skills, like, this is a real, a true success story. And I don't know if I had a lot to do with their success. I think I got to reap the benefits of all the good work that was done prior to me getting there. I was just fortunate enough to see it through to the end. So I thought that that was an important story to share in talking about life skills. So in terms of the show, I want to focus on three things when it comes to life skills as a parent. And I'm certainly not an expert, and my frustrations with teaching kids, my own kids' life skills, I think are daily and are consistently there. And some days I feel like we're making strides, and other days I feel like we're starting all over again. So I wanted to talk about manners. I wanted to talk about having routines, and then also chores or responsibilities, either within the family or around the house. I think those three things would kind of be the focus of life skills for young people. So one of the things that I'm noticing with the current situation that we're in is some of the things that are driving us crazy or are sticking points to us about our kids when it comes to life skills is manners. And one of the things I think that I notice the most is the things that make me crazy about my kids are things that must have driven my parents crazy about me. So I think when you see the younger version of you in your face, you personalize it a little bit, and it can be a frustrating situation. So in terms of manners, I think that it's important that you establish with your kids that they need to surround themselves with other good people. And if their friends are not making good decisions, there's no way that they're going to be in line to make good decisions. And how that ties in with manners is just maybe the way that you talk to other people and the way that you talk to other adults. If you see your children having a hard time communicating or struggling with their talking with friends or other adults, these are skills that you can certainly work with and work on within your house. You know, introducing yourself, giving a good handshake, making good eye contact. But also, like, my kids have tons of friends in the neighborhood, and they want to hang out and they want to be able to play with them and have them over. And I think that, you know, I need to step away from the I'll text this person's mom or I'll text this person's dad, because these kids, they lose those face-to-face skills of being able to make plans. I can remember as a kid getting kind of booted out in the morning, and it was like, just figure out what you're going to do for the day. And if you're fortunate enough to live in one of those neighborhoods where that's kind of a safe way to go about your day, you need to take advantage of that. We have all these fantastic kids in our neighborhood, and it's okay for them to just congregate. And in terms of manners, part of that is like being able to make plans and being able to appropriately knock on your neighbor's door and ask if someone's home, if they want to come outside and ride bikes or go swimming or any of those things. So manners, I think, is so important. And I think, again, in terms of advice, I'm not a big on advice, but I do know this, that if you ask my kids what the number one priority in our house in terms of behavior is, it's treating other people well. And I think that the best way to do that as a parent is just to model that behavior, and treat other people really well. And I think if your kids see you treating people well, in return, they'll know how to treat other people, how to be a good friend, how to treat an authority figure or someone that you respect. I know that if they see the way that I behave around my parents or around someone that I really respect, whether it's my in-laws or you know, someone that I coach with or someone that I work with, I think it's good to have good manners and establish good manners by modeling that behavior. Now, you know, do I have buddies and friends that I kind of bullshit with all the time, and some of our language isn't great? But yeah, of course. But I'm not saying that you need to be prim and proper at all times, but I do think that there's a time and place. And I think that kids do pick up on things that are, you know, social cues and things, whether it's language or, you know, your inability to communicate with people. If it's something that you struggle with, your kids can pick up on that and they may struggle with it as well. So manners, I think, are so important. And I do think that sometimes it's frustrating and it's time consuming to remind your kids to say please and thank you, and remind your kids to make good eye contact. And I know I work with a lot of guys and coaching, and we have a lot of visitors that are older males, and it's so important for my oldest son to be able to speak to them and to be able to be respectful to them and to be able to make eye contact with them and be able to answer their questions. And that to me is so important. And it is a skill that we kind of harp on from time to time. And we do have to revisit some of those social cues a lot, because manners are important, and manners are important not only for kids, but they're important for adults. There's nothing more off-putting than an adult that can't communicate or that is rude or disrespectful. So if you're going to be home and you're going to focus on some things, I think manners is a really good place to start. And again, I'm not an expert, but I also know, like, a rude person, a disrespectful person, you can see coming a mile away, and it is very off-putting. So spending time and making sure that your kids know how to communicate with other people, know how to be a good friend, know how to make plans, know how to treat other adults in their life. I think it's worth your time invested. So the other thing is routines. So we've been stuck home forever, it feels like. And I think a lot of times we start our days early, or we start our days a little bit later. And there are some days that look prettier than others. I've had days that we've been home in quarantine and I've looked around at 1 o'clock and everyone's still in their pajamas. We haven't really moved anything forward. And then there's other days where we're shot out of a cannon at 8 o'clock. Everyone's dressed, everyone's ready, everyone's got their bed made, all this stuff. I do think that our days go really well when there's an established routine, because I think that the routine kind of sets a good tone for the house. So one of the things that I think is important is to establish a routine that works for you. You know, having working from home, I know that I've been trying to get up earlier than my kids so that I can get a good start, whether that's, you know, me having coffee and showering and getting up and getting to work and getting a little bit done before everybody starts ordering breakfast and bossing each other around or trying to jockey for the TV and things like that. So I think establishing a good routine for the kids is such a valuable life skill. I know that, we have fans in the house and kids have to unplug their fans. They have to make their beds. We want them to get dressed and brush their teeth, and whatever the routine is for you, I think is important. But as a counselor, this is like a little bit light. And if you're questioning whether you fall into this category, then it's a good reminder, because it is in the air, and a lot of one-on-one time with young kids. I think that hygiene is such an important life skill. So, with kids that vary in age, we all, their hormones are going up and down. I think hygiene is always something that changes, whether all of a sudden your kid gets off the bus and they kind of smell, or they didn't, they need to use deodorant, or you have to monitor whether they're brushing their teeth or not. Trust me, as a guy that works with young people and has worked with young people for 15 years, make it a priority. Hygiene is so, so important. And especially like with the young men, because I think that they can be fast and they want to do everything super quick, and making sure that they've put on deodorant and making sure that they have clean clothes on and making sure that they, change their shirt and change their shorts, and all those sorts of things are so important. And I think if you're going to make it a priority, it's definitely worth it, because if you send your kid to school and they're not appropriately hygiened, or you send them outside to play with friends, like it's such a social turnoff, and it eventually catches up with them. And not to mention establishing that routine, that hygiene is important, that being clean is important, that presenting is important, I think is helpful as well. It's a great life skill for young kids to learn at an early age. So hygiene, make it part of your routine, make it part of an everyday lifestyle. Let them see you also, like brushing your teeth, picking out clean clothes, making sure that, your laundry is where it needs to be. And if something's dirty, we don't wear it again, we wash it. And all of those things, as long as you can set up a good routine, it just becomes second nature. So some people are probably saying, like, Bryan, you're nuts. This is like 101. But it isn't 101 for everybody. I think it's different in every house. I know that I'm manic in terms of my hygiene, so I don't always look great, but I can tell you that my skin is clean and I smell good. So that's a priority in our house, where other things, it looks like our house is bursting at the seams at times, and we certainly don't have everything figured out by any means. We're half the time fighting the same battles every single day that we fight and talk about. These are our routines, and we still, we've done it 3 days in a row, and then our kids will go 3 or 4 days without doing those things that are expectations in our house. So I think establishing those routines so that they become everyday expectations will help them in the long run, because when they become young adults or independent or need to get themselves up and need to get themselves to school or get themselves to a job, they'll have a good routine and at least know what it looks like. And they can make the choice at that point as an adult whether or not they're going to follow through on it, but at least they'll know what it is. So yeah, manners, routines. Let me take a quick sip of this. I don't have a guest, so I'm doing a lot of talking. The last thing is chores, and I think that chores are hard. It's something that looks so different from when we were raised by our parents to how we're raising our kids now. I think that there's so much more going on, and there's so many more distractions. And also there's this we have this skill set because our parents made us cut the grass and weed whack and weed the garden and water the grass, or wash this and clean the table and do the dishes. And we just do it because it was how we were raised to do that. And you can always catch yourself kind of like babying your kids a little bit, or treating them like little princes and princesses. So I think that chores are okay, and chores are a good thing. I'm not against, and again, it's just my perspective. It's not gospel. It's not rules, but I'm not against, paying for cheap labor. If someone in my house is willing to do a little bit of work, I don't mind, rewarding on the back end. But what I don't want to hear, and I won't mention any names, but there was a member of my family, one of my children, that at one point during quarantine had washed the dishes, and now they talked about it for 3 weeks. They washed like 3 or 4 dishes, and then they talked about it for 3 or 4 weeks. So it's not like they're not going to get a trophy every time that they do something, but I also don't turn them away from trying new chores. If they want to help sort with the laundry or fold towels or do the dishes, I'm not going to tell them they're wonderful, but I'm not going to turn down the help. So I think it's okay to have a couple of manageable chores that are age appropriate. And if your life allows it or your beliefs allow it, it's okay to give them a small allowance for doing chores. But like, I'll say this, that there are specific chores in this house that sometimes, some weeks we're really good at holding our kids accountable for, and other weeks we're horrible at it. I can catch myself doing the only 3 or 4 things that I ask my kids to do, whether it's feed the dog or go outside and take the dog for a walk or go play, and those like little tasks that some days I have the energy to kind of just do it myself, or I'm not doing a great job of holding my kids accountable. But I think it's important. I think it's important for them to have chores and have some responsibilities so that they can see what the gain is from having these responsibilities. I know that my oldest son, he's kind of taken the dog on as a project this spring and summer, and he does take some pride in the dog being able to walk on a leash, and we have this fenced in backyard so he can play with her in the backyard and let her run like crazy. And he does take some pride in that. And I know that, my daughter will help me with some of the cooking. And if we have a meal that's manageable for her to help out, I know that she may not always eat what we've made because she doesn't particularly try a lot of things, but she does take pride in helping out and helping out with that meal. And she'll ask, is it good? And she wants to be told, she wants to have that ownership of it. So I do think that chores does establish a sense of pride and a sense of knowing what hard work is like. I know that, speaking of chores, this is more punitive, but I am going to share it because why not? It's my show. If we hear that one of our kids is bored in the house, because that's like a big thing, like how could you possibly be bored? It's the summer. You have every single kind of thing at your fingertips in terms of video games and bikes and swimming pools and a dog and a backyard and a swing set, trampoline, the whole nine. So when we hear that they're bored, they get assigned a baseboard to wash. So that kind of gets that dialogue of we're supposed to entertain our kids 24/7. So that's just kind of like a funny little punitive chore that we've snuck in this summer because, we found that it was important, and so in terms of life skills, I think that manners, I think that routines, and I think that chores are all good things. When I did the Instagram, questions a couple of weeks back for episode 3, I asked the audience about some of the things that they were teaching their kids while they were quarantined and what life skills that they thought were important. And some of them were great when we covered them with manners and routines and chores, but other things that you can think about if they're age appropriate for your kids is like, money management, I think is a good skill. I think it's a skill that, you don't get to see a lot in person as a kid because everything is done on a debit card. I can remember going to the grocery store and my mother writing a check or paying in cash, and you could kind of tangibly see the interaction and what the value was, if it was $80 for groceries, and to see how to write out a check and how to physically do that or to do the cash and make the change. I think that those were good skills that I learned as a kid, and that one of our listeners had mentioned managing money. So if there's some sort of creative activity, whether that's an allowance with some expenses and allowing your kids to purchase things with their own money, I think that allows them to learn some money management skills. And I think that was really cool. One of the priorities that my wife had started with our kids while we were teaching them for quarantine was typing. I'm a fantastic typer, and I type every single day on a keyboard, on a computer, on a laptop. But our kids are, that's not really a skill anymore. So we started teaching them, making them do a typing program so that they could learn how to type, because I work with high school students that can write these like 10-page papers, and they write them on their phone, like they text it and they write everything on their phone, but it would be so much easier for them to hop on a keyboard and be able to type. So that was kind of a life skill that we've been working on, and I don't know, it's kind of fell by the wayside since the online schooling portion has ended and our summer has started. But I did think it was cool, and you could track the words per minute, how they were doing. And it was also something that I think would be a valuable skill for our kids to have that maybe isn't being taught in school much anymore. So the last thing that I really wanted to touch on was kind of just the Father's Day episode last week. I really didn't get an opportunity to talk about my father much. I mean, hosting the show is not always about sharing your personal experience. Today it is because I'm solo, but most of the time it's about the guest, it's about the co-host. And I had 4 great dads on with me last week, and they all got to talk about their dads. And even though Ray was on, and he's my brother, got to talk about his dad, I thought that I would take some time to talk about, maybe some of the life skills that my dad had instilled in me, and some of the things that I'm trying to replicate at home with my kids, because we're in a different world. And the world that I grew up in, I think my dad was one of the last of his kind that just kind of grinded and went to work and didn't necessarily love going to work, but he was earning, and he was trying to get his kids and get his family everything that they wanted. And he was kind of the last of that kind, and my priorities as a kid from his standpoint was to have more and to have better and to go to college and do something that you really wanted to do. And I just had this kind of symbol of a guy who, was so selfless in the fact that he got up and he went to work and he worked nights, and he wanted, I don't think he always wanted to be there, but he never stopped going, and he never stopped working incredibly hard. So I think hard work and kind of a dedication, and also a loyalty to your family and making your family a priority and being selfless was the dad skill and the dad life skill that my father taught me the most. I think that my brother touched on it a little bit. I'm 37 now, but I think that my dad still feels that responsibility to me and my friends to be available and to be in a mentoring role not in a judgmental role, not in a punitive role, but his availability and his selflessness, even now, to me and my friends and to my wife and to my friends' wives and all of our kids, is so it's so endearing, and it's so genuine, and it comes from such a good, selfless place. I feel like I have a responsibility to not only recognize it, but to carry that torch and to be selfless and to put others ahead of myself, because that's how I was raised. And that's how both of my parents raised me, was to, they made their bones by investing in kids. And I think that that's probably the biggest lesson that I learned from my dad and my mom, was investing in young people. My dad would work nights so that he could coach and that he could be home during the day. And there were days that he was home and grumpy and sleeping and upset and all those things, but he made himself available so that he could coach my sister's basketball team and my little league team and high school teams as he progressed in his coaching career as well. And now he's, one of the most respected high school coaches in the state. But he invested in kids. And I think that I took that as a win-win situation. Like, I knew that when I became an adult, if I invested my time, my heart, my money, my education, and my passion into young people, that I would have success and that I would have fulfillment in life. So where my dad didn't have that quality of life in terms of his professional career, he was more of a earner and a grinder and a provider. I decided to take my profession and invest it into kids so that I would have that all the time. I would have that option to work with young people through coaching, but also through public education. And I definitely got that from my dad. So any parent that is kind of nervous about how their kid is doing and is my kid going to be all right, I can tell you this, that when I was 16 years old, I'm sure my father wanted to wring my neck 1,000 times over. I'm what they call a late bloomer. So just have patience with your kids through this life skills process and understand that whatever you're doing and whatever you're saying and whatever you're making a priority, they're listening, they're watching, and they're replicating. So if you feel like you're beating a dead horse with these routines and these manners and chores and talking to your kids about what's important, understand that a 10-year-old may not hear you the same way that a 16-year-old might hear you, may not hear you the same way that an adult will hear you, but they are listening. And it took a really long time for those priorities to click for me. I know that I started really appreciating my father the older I got, and the way that I watched him with other young adults made me appreciate him for what he did for me when I was a young kid. And maybe I didn't appreciate it as much when I was going through it, because it was either, like tough love or a story I didn't want to hear or a lesson I wasn't mature enough to learn. But through watching him and then putting myself in the same situation as a coach and a dad, my appreciation for him has grown so much. And I'm really lucky to have a mentor like that. And I'm sure that goes for a lot of the dads that are listening now, is that you learn from your dad forever. But some of the things that he was drilling you with when you were younger, you don't appreciate until you apply those skills, because I can talk to my 10-year-old son and my 7-year-old daughter about being a good person and treating people with respect. But the reality of it is that they're young and they're going to make a whole bunch of mistakes. But if they know that being a good person is important, and surrounding yourself with people that are quality and that have the same values as you is important, that's a lesson that they can carry into adulthood. And when I reflect back to that 2013 softball team that I talked about in the beginning, I think that a lot of the things that I learned as a young kid, or that was instilled in me as a young adult by my parents, and then seeing kind of the outcome of it in a different form with working with young women and knowing and seeing these mature kids and these respectful kids and these really goal-driven kids that were supportive of each other, nice to each other, kind to each other, respectful to the adults in their life, it all just started clicking a little bit. So I think that the life skills come in time. So in real time, continue to fight those fights and fight those battles with your children. Make sure that they know what's important to you as an adult and as a parent, but have patience. There are late bloomers all over the place. I think I was maybe 23 or 24 years old before I could really have a decent conversation with my parents in terms of, understanding where they were coming from, and understanding that my decisions and my choices were going to impact how I was viewed and how I was respected by people in the world and in the community, and also how I wanted to present myself to others. So it took a while, but it wasn't like they weren't trying to teach me those lessons along the way. And I can remember being reminded when I did make some of those mistakes that, this is gonna either catch up with you or you need to start doing X, Y, and Z. And I had heard it for the 100th time, but eventually it does click. So it is worth it. And they work their butts off, and they still do. And, they still do with adult children and 9 grandkids. They still work their butts off on trying to make these life skills that are important to our family, important to our kids, and important to us as parents to their grandkids. So the work is continuous and it's ongoing. But I will say this, coming from this huge family with tons of grandkids, and I have a bunch of nieces and nephews, and it's worth it. It's worth having a tight-knit family that cares about the same things and makes things a priority that are important to us. And it's fun to watch it play out with my siblings and then also with their kids. And they worked really hard. And I think that the work that they did motivates me to do the work that I'm doing. So I do appreciate specifically, my dad, because this is a show for dads. And I could go on forever and ever about how fantastic and supportive and loving my mother was. But because of the Father's Day show, I thought it was important to just kind of put my spin on my appreciation for my father. And I thought, what a great episode, the life skills episode. What a great way to kind of pay homage to a great guy and a fantastic mentor and a really, really genuine, loving, caring person. So shout out, Dad. All right. So I think that's probably where we're going to end today. And I just wanted to give a couple of show updates, and maybe I will down the road, but we've done 6 episodes, and I say we because my shout out today goes to my wife, who's fantastic. She's been kind of helping me with the technology and some of the ideas and some of the brainstorming. She's so smart. She's so organized, and she's just been fantastic through this whole process. Also, the house is quiet because she's got the kids busy today, and that also helps as well. But I did want to shout her out because the first 6 episodes, she's been hip to hip with me on this. I can't really get her on camera. That's just not her. That's not her forte, but she's got fantastic ideas, and she's really helped me kind of put this thing out here. So I did want to shout her out. But I am going to take a little bit of time off. So there were 6 episodes, and now July's coming. Anyone that knows me knows that the 4th of July is big for me. I love that. I love the holiday. I love the month of July. I love spending time with my family. I'm going to start taking some videos and doing some smaller things that hopefully I can make into an episode about some of my time spent with family and friends during the month of July. And hopefully I'll be back in a couple of weeks. I do have some really good guests lined up. I'm in the process of setting up some more co-hosts and kind of keeping this thing rolling. So I do appreciate all the support. You guys have been fantastic. The audience has been great. The views and the subscribers climb every single week. So I'm really, really proud of that. And I appreciate all your help on spreading the message and, reposting and sharing and tagging people and all that social media stuff that helps. So the first 6 episodes were great. I loved the guests, and I love the co-host, and I love the content that we were able to provide. So stay tuned, but like stay with me. But I am going to take a couple of weeks off to kind of enjoy the summer and enjoy the month of July, because it's just like it's the best time of year to be with family and to be with friends and to kind of just appreciate, especially during tough times. It's good to appreciate the positives, and that's kind of how I'm going to spend July, is kind of appreciating all the positives that I have in my life and all the good things that I have going on around me. So I'll be back soon, and I'm sure I'll post something even during the break, because I just get antsy and like to be busy. So I do appreciate all the support. Please check out all of my information. You can find it on my Instagram account, brich1030, and on Twitter at Coach Richards12. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel. All my videos are posted on my YouTube channel every week. And also I'm working with the First Time Father Project, which is just a great kind of support site for dads. All of my episodes are posted on the First Time Father Project website, which is firsttimefatherproject.com. And you can find everything there, and stay with me. And I appreciate all the support up to this point. And everyone enjoy the 4th of July, and enjoy the summer, and enjoy your family, and keep teaching those life skills, because they're so important. And your kids are listening. It's just not sinking in yet. You might have a late bloomer like me. All right, stay safe and take care.